All right, I'm going to go ahead and start. All right, it's going to be important for me to start this drawing out by defining or sort of setting a little bit of a roadmap for myself. And if you've seen the other drawing on gray paper, you've seen this as well. I'm just going to make 4 squares. And I'm going to have a sort of split here. All right, so, and we'll call this S for shadow, and that L for light. And I know my full shadow, get my stick in here. I'm working with Conté on this drawing, so this is a Conté 2B. It's kind of soft and smooth, almost waxy feeling. You'll notice it being a lot different to charcoal in that it does not smear very much. It smears a little bit. You can see that little bit of smearing. But if that were charcoal, you'd see a lot more. All right, so this is going to be my deepest shadow. That's as dark as the pencil or the stick or whatever can go. Come back in with my white Conté and say this is my lightest light. It's as light as that can go. Now, there's some decision making here. So basically what I'm saying about this square is that this is right about the darkest my light is going to be. And this square is right about the lightest my shadow is going to be. And I want to keep my light and shadow separate from each other. So I'm going to, with a pencil or with a stick, and you'll remember, well, if you watch the other video, I'm going to use a little bit more pencil in this one just for maybe some finer work. But largely it's going to be these Conté sticks. And this is a carbon pencil, which is similar to the Conté in its characteristics. It doesn't smear as much. It's kind of smoother feeling than the charcoal. And then I happen to have a white Conté pencil. You can just get the Conté brand pencil in white as well. Just a moment. All right. All right, so the decision I need to make is going to be this is essentially my core shadow. This is my reflected light. This is my halftone. This is my highlight, roughly speaking. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to have a passive value for my reflected light. Like that's going to be maybe my range. So what I'm saying with this setup is that my shadows are all going to get something. Some of this dark Conté is going to exist all throughout my shadows, even in the reflected light, even in the stomach, chest, places that seem kind of light, they're still going to get some charcoal. Halftone, this is going to be maybe areas of the forearm, areas as we're passing into shadow are going to be roughly gray paper, and then white is going to exist only in the light. And that's only where the light source is directly hitting that model. So with that roadmap, I can kind of go forward with the drawing, and I'll go about it the same way that we do the drawings normally, which is starting with the gesture. I would consider this pose to be closed. So I'm just going to throw this basic envelope in. Empty bit there, an empty bit there, an empty bit there. This is like gesturally mapping out my negative space. Just really really loose. I can't afford to be really heavy-handed with this Conté because you'll see it doesn't smear very much at all. So I need to get a feel for the pose with relatively light work. If you're really heavy-handed, now's the time to change your ways. All right, and I can start taking measurements on this even and just sort of see like there's like head to tail, elbow to foot. How does that look? Take that measurement, and the width is roughly the same. So head to tail, head to rear, goes from that toe, bottom foot, toe to about the same spot here. So if I rack this, take a measurement, boom. So if anything, I'm a little bit wide. So that's good news for me because I felt like I was getting close to the edge there, a little too close to the edge. So I'm going to redefine that and just do another quick. Yeah, that feels better. See where that knee lands. Right about where I've got it. Just keeping this somewhat gestural. I'm going to find this negative shape just real generically first. And I can measure, sort of compare this triangle to the triangle that I see in the image. Again, I'm keeping this relatively light because this Conté is really quite dark. I'll have some wiggle room with it, but not a ton. Right, this seems like it's far too close. I might need to extend that just a little bit. Let's see. Boom. I feel decent about this shape in relation to this stuff. I don't feel so great now about this. Let's go shoulder to elbow, to hand and up. Yeah, this stuff seems a little too short. Like this particularly. If I look at the angle, yeah, this knee should be down. I'm going to go ahead and get a center line down the stomach here because it seems like it runs right about there. I'm looking for the sternal notch here, which is tucked back in. You can see that tendon. There's a bit of a tendon pointing straight to it here. It's diagonal up from the armpit. It's almost like this armpit points straight to it. If I carry from this shoulder, I'm going to ignore the head just for a second to align these shoulders. If I just run an arc through this section here, that'll give me one shoulder to the other shoulder more or less. Do a little bit of elliptical massing here. It makes sense to me to do that. Sort of like deltoid bicep, tricep. I'm going to look at the negative shape again because this is feeling a little bit too long to me. Like if things are starting to grow pretty big right there. So I'm just going to do a real quick check on that negative shape. It's like the same size as this one. So yeah, I've grown quite a bit too large there. That's what that negative shape looks more like. So can feel decent about making some of this stuff smaller. I'm going to take a width of the arm just real quick just to see how it compares maybe to the other arm because I feel pretty good about this one. I feel like this one's getting a little bit or a lot too beefy and they're about the same. So that should be what I have up here. All right, and this is business as usual. I'm just going to go about measuring, checking proportions, getting the drawing itself to where I'm feeling pretty decent about it before I start going in with any shading or anything like that. There will be some incidental swiping, like some of the stuff in here. It's starting to darken up, but it's not a real solid attempt yet. Feel of that hand. Right, I'm gonna have quite a bit of interesting work through here when it's time to do the shadows and on the back here as well. I don't want to draw a full-on hand here. I just want something that's mimicking what that hand is doing. So I haven't drawn a bunch of fingers. I've got one little overlap there. The triangle and the wrist feel pretty decent. I'm going to call myself happy with that. There's that tendon, the biceps femoris muscle. It's a straight, solid line right to that head of the fibula. I feel like this is probably going to need to grow a little bit downwards. Let's see how far that needs to grow. If I go heel to knee, I'm just going to go hunting. What else is that size? Knee to hip, it's like the same. It's like that. So knee to heel, so right about there. There's that lateral malleolus, it's creating a little fold down there. That's a great thing to get in an ankle. And then when this foot is bent forward, we've got some wrinkles happening right there as well. Then it takes just a gentle zigzag, bulge out for that knuckle of the big toe. I'm going to call that reasonable for that foot. We're really just kind of reducing these things to their basic shape. So I'm going to check the size of this foot because I'm looking at it straight down from the knee. I'm hitting my toe. When I look at the model, I don't see that. So it's a little shy of vertical. So I could move this whole foot back a little bit. I have to ask myself, is it bugging me in the drawing at this point? Let's see, I'm going to check size of the foot. The size is good. The size of the foot is roughly It's this big. So I've made this foot entirely too large, which is strange because often we do the opposite. Let me just double check. It's the same as the width across the chest. So this, and the foot should all be the same. So I'm a little bit out here. Boom, should be the same as that. So I'm a little bit wide in the chest. So I'm going to favor that line just to get me a little more in line with this. And then the foot should be kind of no longer than that. Check the width of the foot here. Starting to seem pretty wide. I've got it about the same width as the arm, and it's about half that, which means if you saw the other video, then you'll see I can come any of these mistake lines, I can kind of come through and reassess them and sort of get rid of them even. Flatten that foot out a little bit. All right, I'm just about happy. And I could spend quite a bit more time tightening this up, measurement-wise, all of that, but I'm going to go ahead and move on for the sake of shading. One thing I am going to do in this drawing, which I kind of like to do, and I'm okay with you doing it as well, as long as it makes sense to. This back leg, let's see. Because it's in the back and presumably, less important because of that, you can just silhouette this. This leg. So it kind of becomes, it'll feel like it's in the background when we're finished with it because of the fact that we've put it in silhouette. Which means it's not going to get as much detail. It's not going to get as much shading, though it is going to get at least some sense of the shape. I want the shape to be sensible. Now I've got these quite close together, but at this point I'm going to look at the drawing and be like, so if I look at my negative shape in the reference, they're a little further apart here, and it's because I didn't extend this leg back any farther. I'm going to read the drawing right now and ask myself, do I feel decent about the gesture? Do I feel decent about where things are at? And my answer is yes, I feel pretty good about where things are. So I'm going to leave this here. Is it convincing? I think so. You have to kind of be honest with yourself. And what I would say to myself is if I wanted it to be dead on, and I felt that this was bugging me, like this was going to be a problem, then you kind of owe it to yourself to fix it. There's something a little bit off-putting here. I think this calf is just a little bit big. Yeah, I want that to jut out sooner. That bump feels like it sticks forward just a little too strongly. This model doesn't have super beefy legs. That feels a little better. This hand, I'm reading this hand as being mostly in shadow. So I'm going to get this contour. There is a bit of it in the light here, the pinky, just the contour of that pinky is in the light. So I'm going to try and get that contour. And it disappears. Thumb is a rather dark shape right next to it that tees off into it like that. That's all dark. I'll fill that in darker here in a little while. There's an empty space. So it's like boom, zig, zag, flat, up, in. This is just a negative shape right there. And this negative shape is a little too small. Yeah, I would say it's a lot too small. Let's see what happens with this. So this is another one where I have to decide believability versus dead-on accuracy. I've got a short, this shape seems just a little bit too short to me. It could be that my hand is too big. It could be that my whole head area is too big. I'm going to do just a quick measurement real quick. I'm going to take this measurement and see what else is that length. Oh, it's the width of this. Yeah, so I've got this just a little bit too far in. So this is one instance where I laid that value in, probably did it too soon. Get some of that value out. I'm going to downplay these decisions here. And I'm just going to extend this stuff further. If this was charcoal, I wouldn't try doing that too much because it would tend to make a much bigger mess. So that's about where it went. I'll just double check. So when I check the width of the arm, yeah, that's about the length to where the thumb starts. So I need to move this hand, all of that stuff further that way. So I'm just repeating that negative shape that I had before. Flat. That chromium. All right, do I feel reasonable about that? I think I do. All right, so I'm going to go in and start defining where my shadows are. And you could draw these in line-based. So just like we did that shadow shapes drawing, and I think I'll do that first. Really interesting shadow that's here, then loops over. The nice thing about these sticks is you can lay them on their side and swipe that whole shadow in almost instantly. It's a really cool cast shadow going from that finger up onto the back. This is all in shadow, so it gets at least one pass. Some nice shadow shapes down here. These are really showing off some of that leg anatomy. All right, this stuff will get fleshed out a little bit more, particularly when we come in with the white. Here's that back leg going into silhouette. I'm just ignoring the light shape that I see right there for now. just going to put that whole leg into shadow, just so it falls into the background. I'm going to say we get a little bit of light on this face. But not much. And I have to ask myself, how much do I really want us to, where do I want us to look? I think right up here is this stripe through the leg and the arm. That's the most interesting bit. So I might just throw that whole head into silhouette as well, just to focus our eyes. I don't really want us to be looking towards the face anyway, so I'm going to block that off by filling it in. That'll help it seem resolved even as I work on this other stuff. Right, there's some nice stuff happening in this shadow. So I'm going to be just a little bit more specific about the shadow edge. Now, if I prefer a smoother look and I don't like all of this page texture, you can with like a dry paper towel or a chamois. Let me get one. If I have a chamois, I can work this into the page and get a much smoother effect. If I do that, it's going to require me to erase my light shapes back to the gray paper before I add the white Conté onto it. So I think I am going to do that just for the sake of doing it. It's going to give me a really smooth middle tone. And I would do this with a chamois or something, not really with your hand. The chamois does a little better job at spreading things around. So I have just set myself up though now to have to come in with my eraser to get some of these light shapes back. But that's okay. I'm going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and overshoot that though, so I don't want to just pop little highlights here and there. That's how I would do this if I were just doing black Conté. But because I'm bringing the white in and if the paper is gray, I can be a little more aggressive with this eraser, meaning I can take out more information than it seems like I need to. And I'll bring my pencil back in and recapture some of this stuff. So if you watch the other video, you'll notice the drawing is really retains that gritty kind of paper texture. This one's going to be a little smoother feeling. So now I'm just going to draw with this eraser as if it's the white stick. Keeping in mind that I am going to go just a little heavier on the eraser. because I know there's white stick coming. If I want to keep that paper texture laid back, then I need to stop swiping and I need to start hatching, like laying in really light marks with the, almost like this is a pencil, or use a pencil, like a carbon pencil or something. And I think that's what I'm going to do, is use my carbon pencil for any other hatching type stuff I might need to do. Any other darks that I need to lay back in. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to work this leg. I'm going to leave that leg just like it is, because one, for time, two, I want it to read like a silhouette. This stuff seems pretty bright right now. It seems light in value until I put my white pencil in. That white pencil will show us what light value is all about. I'm going to ease some of those back. I don't want them to take over. All right, back up here. This is going to be a spot that gets some light pencil really a lot, because it's got this, there's a really nice cast shadow right there. Some serratus anterior. I'm going to go ahead and erase more of that out than I want to as well, just because I know I'm going to come back with that white pencil. Little wrinkle there. All right, I'm going to pick up this little cast shadow as well. Things are gentler down here. I might not use the white as much. All right, and I used the white stick before on this part, but I think I'm going to use the eraser right now, and that's to just bring my negative shapes back. So I'll kind of get my silhouette. Get my silhouette back. And I'm not really going to do it up here because this stuff is kind of standing on its own already. This stuff's all getting kind of lost together. So I'm just going to bring it back. By increasing the contrast right there. It gives it kind of a sense of background. All right, do I want it down in the back of the leg? I think I'll do a little bit here and there. Just kind of give, anywhere I see things seeming a little too same. Like getting this negative shape back may not be a bad idea. Just want a little bit of contrast there. All right, at this point with the eraser, things are so subtle that if I use the white stick, if I go swiping in, I run a chance of just bowling over everything that's here. So I've kind of taken this to a place now where with the other drawing I could kind of start swiping in, and I could do that here, but I'd risk getting some of the subtlety, having it get lost. Instead, I'm going to come in with the pencil. A little bit too, I don't know what. All right, I'm going to come through with my white pencil and just kind of beef up some of the light stuff. And I'm going to pick spots strategically, like where do I see this lightest stuff? Well, I see right here. For sure. And even down into here. Back here, there's a little. Really sharp pencil, really gentle work here. So I'm treating this just like when we did the black paper, only instead of flying blind, I've got a really decent roadmap telling me what to do. I had to do a time lapse for this part of the video. I don't know. I don't know if it's better to see the drawing happening real time, or time lapse is nice because it goes a lot faster, but the problem I have with time lapses, I understand why people do them, because you can't have people sit there watching for hours on end. But the problem I have with them is that they make everything seem inevitable and like a magic trick almost. And it's not that. There's all kinds of decisions, slow things that you miss in a time lapse. And it's not as flashy, I guess, but it's more honest, maybe. Here's where I lost a little bit of that back, so I'm just going to play that background game we played before, just kind of right there, just to give me some subtlety. All right, and this is where we're getting to the stage of the drawing now that it's the time consumption stage, I guess you could call it. Depending on where you are taking this drawing, you could spend quite a lot of time on this part, just getting little nuances, little transitions of light and shadow. I'm not going to go too wild with it. Keep it within a reasonable time frame, but just be ye warned, or recommended. I don't know what the right way to put it is, but the more time you spend on this, the better your results are going to be. And you can feel free to throw the playback speed on YouTube to a higher level. You don't have to sit here and watch every little bit of this. Just make sure if something changes or if something happens, you kind of know what the thinking was behind it. Don't assume if you play it fast, I'll just repeat, it's going to be like, to some extent, it's going to feel like it's not real. And I don't want it to do that, because that's when you'll be like, oh, well, of course, and you won't buy into the fact that you can get this to happen in your own drawing as well. And I think that's unfortunate, because you very well could. And focus on that core shadow. It's going to cause things to pop out a little bit harder. This shadow's a little stronger. That'll make this pop out a little harder. That bump. Use my finger kind of like that chamois before. Didn't feel like that was integrating very well, so a little bit of pinky work. But don't get carried away with that, because it can go sideways on you fast. You start smearing everything all over the place, you lose your clarity, you lose it all. All right, I'm going to leave that bottom like that, because I don't really want us looking down here. I want this to play support to what's happening up here. This is where the white stick is. That's where I want our focus to be. I'm going to come through here and strengthen up some of the core shadows. And then I think I'm going to leave this part of the arm. I'm going to leave that part of the head. Anything out in the periphery here, I'm just going to kind of leave. And I really want our tight focus to be like right in this strip here, I think. I'm not going to worry about out here. It's got this level in it, so all that light in the shadow, reflected light, whatever I see, I'm going to leave it. I'm just focusing on the core shadow right now, right after it turns into shadow. I have to ask myself, if it's round, if you remember the egg, if I want it to feel rounder, I'm going to pump that core shadow, and it's going to make it feel rounder. And I can go ahead and let it drop off in here. If my light shadow border is nice and my core shadow is nice and strong and my light shadow border is obvious, it's going to really pop in this light section right where I want it to. That's all soft edge. There's a little cast shadow here, so I'm going to get that hard edge back. Then it rounds up. Another cast shadow here. So it's like soft edge, hard edge, soft edge, hard edge. This feels awfully big. Maybe I need to shave that down just a tad. All right, I think that's just I'm gonna just about do it for this one. I might pop in a few spots here. Where the highlight seems strongest. And with my carbon pencil, I'm going to come back and just clean up some of these contours. Just really to accentuate. That's it. I'm not putting a hard line everywhere. I'm going to be really selective about where this goes. And it's just going to be to describe really just to give a little bit more clarity to the edge. Here I noticed it felt like lines on this face silhouette a little too much, so I'm just going to kind of grow away from the lines just so it looks more like a shape, because I don't really want us to be focusing there too much. And maybe just a few contours up in here, because there's some wrinkles down in here that I think are kind of nice. I don't want to get too carried away though, because they are in the shadows. So I'm just gonna hint at them. I'm not going to line this side out very strongly because I don't really want, this is supporting as well. I want to focus up here. This is my stripe of focus, maybe to an extent down the leg, but this, you can see I'm just going to let that hang out in the back. Maybe I'll give just a bit more presence to that front leg, just so it doesn't bleed into this back one too much. Yeah, that's not bad. kind of like the atmosphere of what's going on up there. So I think I'm going to leave it. I think I'm going to call it there. So in this one, I used quite a bit less of the white charcoal, mostly pencil this time. And that gray paper was the perfect sort of middle ground from which to build up the whole rest of the drawing. All right, I'll post this one. God, they get so distorted. By the way, when you're turning these in, like look how hard it is to grade proportions when I do this, right? The feet are huge, the body's tiny. If you don't take a picture from straight on, it makes it really hard for me to see what you saw when you were drawing. So just beware of that when you're taking pictures for turning these in. All right.